Thank you, Brock. That was beautiful. I'm Dolores Still. I'm one of the worship associates for today. Our minister, Reverend Eileen Casey-Campbell, is out of the pulpit today. We want to welcome you to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. We want to welcome those of you who are joining us online, who got up, time to turn it on, and for those of you who braved the storm and wiped off the snow from your cars in time to get here. It's so good to see you here today. We are honored to welcome Reverend Eileen Casey-Campbell to the pulpit today. Reverend Eileen is the settled minister of our nearby sibling church, the UU Church of Canandaigua. She lives in Rochester with her partner, 2 children, and 2 goofy dogs. Reverend Eileen is particularly devoted to the spiritual practice of participating in creation with her own two hands, making knitted hats, bread, gardens, and terrible pottery. We are joined today by so many people who are here, some who are here working and some who are not. They're making this service possible for those of you who are at home to see, and we thank them all, and they're all part of our ministry team. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitors form that can be found in the chat for our folks online, and that can be found in your pews for folks in person. Please fill out the form so we can offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor, let us take a moment to turn towards the camera and to greet our online worshiping community. Please offer a wave.
Turn around.
I think the camera is back there. It's new. Last week, I think, is our first time that we had it. If you are online, please pop into the chat to offer a greeting and to share your joys and sorrows. If you are here at First Universalist, let's take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting. Door. Please join our opening hymn. Hymn number 1.
You may have noticed, in spite of what your order of service says, I am not Dolores. I'm Reverend Eileen. I'm so glad to be with you this morning. A fun fact about me is that I'm a yoga teacher. So when folks find out I'm a yoga teacher, they often feel compelled to tell me all the reasons why they will never do yoga. They hear that I teach and they want me to know that they can't practice yoga because they're too weak or not flexible or the wrong size. And friends, I'd like to start this morning with a confession. It's this: I tell myself the same story sometimes about yoga, sometimes about relationships, sometimes about church. Those thoughts creep into my brain that I'm not good enough, that I should have better alignment, more strength, perfect focus. Those thoughts creep in, even though I know that they're lies. Because underneath those sneaky lies, there sits one big dark lie that whispers, we don't deserve to be here. What an audacious lie that is, right? That we ought to be good before we begin practicing. That our weakness, our softness, our vulnerable spots aren't welcome. In community, we help one another remember that none of us walks through these doors unbroken or unbreakable. We all come here wounded, tender, vulnerable, and our whole soft, lovely selves deserve to be here. In case you're thinking I'm still talking about someone else, and your particular broken parts and soft places aren't what I mean, let me be clear. You are welcome here. Your whole being is welcome here this morning. Your whole beautiful and breakable, wondrous and messed up, holy and profane self, you just as you are, all of who you are, even those sticky, squeaky, hurting, hard to find because they've been buried so deep for so many years, parts of you, you are welcome here. You with your wide open hearts and you with your stuck shut hearts, you're welcome here. You are invited to this celebration. Enter in and have a seat at the table. And may you discover, may each of us discover that a community full of other whole and holy beings has shown up too.
As Clinton Swingle lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light a chalice in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice words in union? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community.
Good morning, First Universalist. I'm Kitty Forbush, she, her, here with Brian Mooney, he, him, as your co-chairs for the 2023-2024 Stewardship Campaign, Draw the Circle Wide. Whoop, whoop. We are kicking off Stewardship Month, which will culminate on Stewardship Sunday, April 16th, after the service at Mocha, when we will all share pieces of the pie.
We are asking for your consideration to help First Universalist Church draw the circle wide. In Rev. Lane May Reed's own words, quote, "We are inviting you to give from a felt sense of having your own circle widen, to give from the place of knowing you are a part of the circle of this church that has been tended for generations.
There is so much to give for. New financial staff, increased technology to enhance our ability to serve this and our online congregations, increased church growth, and to support our justice work in the community. And of course, to support all the other vital programs of this church, the beautiful building itself, and our amazing ministers, office staff, tech support, and music director.
Your pledge packets, did I say that twice? Pledge packets are going in the mail tomorrow. So be watching for them this week. If you have any questions regarding stewardship, you can ask anyone on the stewardship team, because be assured, this was a team effort. The team members are Carl Abbott, Emma Berry, Grant Fish, Catherine Flynn, Bill Jones, Marcy Klein, Paula Marchese, Ann Rohde, and Reverend Lane May Reed.
And Richard Reed.
And Richard Reed. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Richard. It got updated here, but not on here. If any of you, we are just a spontaneous group here.
Yes, we are.
If any of you here this morning, are here this morning, please stand. And if you're online, give a wave so you can be acknowledged and folks know who you are.
Stand.
Grant, there we go.
Yep. Perhaps you've heard a bit about stewardship circles, which will be held over the next 4 weeks. There will be a schedule for signing up for these meetings on the church website. Scroll to the stewardship tab, and there will be sign-up sheets at MOCA. These small group meetings will take place in people's homes, at church, or on Zoom. There are many dates and places available. You will have an opportunity to share with what this church means to you and how your pledge will support the widening circle. Remember, no pledge is too big or too small. Every pledge counts, and every pledge matters. And for the next 4 Sundays, you will hear testimonials from folks who pledge and why First Universalist is so important to them. This morning, Grant Fish is here to share that with you.
I grew up and went to a Presbyterian church. I remember attending church school and later on the youth group that met on Sunday evenings. It was a place that had answers, but you really had a limited group of questions that you could ask. In 1970, I left for college. I stopped going to church. Later, I learned that I had become unchurched. That was the official term. That period lasted about 10 years or longer. I knew that I wanted to be part of a spiritual community. At the same time, I wanted a rational place where I didn't limit my thinking when I got there. When the Sunday paper was large, there was a TV section. Remember that? One week, the back cover of the TV section had an advertisement from the UUA. The tagline said, "Thousands of people like you don't go to church." Several months later, my family and I visited the Unitarian Church here in Rochester. The Unitarian Church here soon became our religious home. When we moved from Rochester, I looked for and found other Unitarian churches, first in Fort Collins, Colorado, and then in Ithaca, New York. I had found something close to what I was looking for. In the late 1980s, we moved back to Rochester, and I became unchurched again. Jump forward to June of 2021. I had been married for almost 50 years and was retired. I thought that my wife and I would spend our lives together. Not so. She called me long distance and told me that she no longer loved me and that she had filed for divorce. I think now that a computer metaphor is the best way to understand what was happening. The old Grant, version 1.0, had for the most part stopped working. The person that I had been depending on and who had been my friend for so long was gone. It was time to have a new version. Grant version 2.0 started running in the late summer of 2021. The new Grant was in beta test stage. It crashed often and was buggy. The 3.0 version of Grant started coming to First Universalist Church. First as going to the online service, and then coming in person. When I came to this church, I was immediately welcomed. I had the opportunity both to reconnect with some old friends and to meet many new ones. I had finally found a religious community where I was comfortable being a part of it. And after a few visits, I realized that this church is a special place. The building, the ministers, the staff, and the congregation. It is a community where I not only feel welcome, but supported. My contributions are appreciated by the communities that I'm part of and by the congregation as a whole. This is a place where I can use my entire mind and experiences. I followed the path to membership and signed the book in May of 2022. I support this church with my time and my money. I have found a spiritual home.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life, thus to be covenant with each other and with all. The offering words are by one of my favorite authors, Anonymous. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring out gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. We connect to the community and to each other by the services we offer and the generosity we share. You are invited to drop an offering in the offering basket or to give online by scanning the QR code in your pew. For those online, please click the link in the Zoom chat window to give to First Universalist Church. You can also send a check in the physical mail. Thank you for your generosity.
Now it's time for a story. This morning's story is written by Barbara Marshman, and it's an old story I've loved for a long time called What If No One Forgave? But I realized in preparing for this morning's service that maybe I need to tell it a little differently than I always have. So I want to tell it to you in a new way this morning, and I need a little help. Non-speaking roles only. Is anyone willing to help out with the story this morning? I need someone who feels like they're a wise elder. You don't have to be a wise elder, you just have to be able to pretend to be one for a few minutes. Come on up, wise elder. And then a couple of people who have some grudges. You don't have to have grudges, you just have to pretend to have them for a few minutes. Reverend Michelle's got some grudges. She's going to pretend to have grudges. Come on up. All right. Let's have our grudges over here. And wise elder, you'll come this way. Thank you. Once upon a time, there was a wise elder. She'd spent all of her days traveling the countryside from town to town to town, and she'd seen many things and met many people, and that's how she'd come to be so wise. And so as she made her way across the countryside to a new town, she came into town and she saw that it looked different from so many of the places that she'd been in her days across her travels. See, the people in this town carried heavy sacks on their backs, so heavy that in fact, yes, they had to walk bent over, hunched with the weight of these enormous sacks they carried with them everywhere. They couldn't even look one another in the eye. They had to keep their eyes on the ground because the weight of their burdens was so much. And so this wise elder wandered through town, standing upright, eyes wide open, and finally came to a young person and asked the young person, "What is this you're all carrying on your backs?" And the young person said, "Oh, these are our grudges. We carry these everywhere we go." Now the wise elder was intrigued, and she said, "Well, you're awfully young to have so many grudges." And the young person said, "Well, they're not just my grudges. Of course, I inherited grudges from my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents. I carry all of their grudges too. And we all carry all of our ancestors' grudges and our own. And what else would we do? There's no other way to live, is there?" And the wise elder said, "You know, I think there is. And I think I could teach you a bit of magic I've learned. Just a few magic words that might relieve you of these burdens. If you'll gather everyone to the town square." And so the townspeople gathered in the town square, and the wise elder taught them these magic words to relieve themselves of the burden of their grudges. She said, "The first set of words I need you to learn are these: I'm sorry." She asked them to repeat after her, and they all repeated. They said, "I'm sorry." And the second set of words she taught them, these magic words, were, "I forgive you." And they repeated after her, "I forgive you." And magically, their burdens, their baggage, their grudges did begin to disappear. And this, my friends, is where the story normally ends. But as I thought about it this morning, as I wrote a sermon about the joy of conflict, I realized that maybe we left something out. Maybe we skipped a step in the story. They take off their baggage, they set it down with their sorries and their I forgive yous. And I think the step we skipped was unpacking the bags, right? In between the I'm sorry and the I forgive you magic, there is probably in the town square a great unburdening and then unpacking of everything that got baggaged up and laid on their backs. And so let's imagine this morning that that is what they did, unpacked all the things, laid them out, made sense of them together, and maybe this process took a little bit longer than the original story had it go. And after all of the unpacking and laying out and figuring out, then the magic words, I forgive you, were able to be spoken and the grudges truly released, and the people could walk upright, look one another in the eyes, feel unburdened, and connect deeply with one another. They thanked the wise elder and all went on their way. And this is the end of our story. Thank you.
I invite you into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As we place stones, as Tom places stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat, that we may hear from the community gathered here. Michael Scott has a joy. I had a tendon repaired in my right elbow this week. Recovery will take a while, but it is going well. Sarah Single has a joy. Joy, deep gratitude, and love to the mystery of creation, who, in addition to the entire universe, made a slight tip to the earth that brings us spring tomorrow. We will drop one stone into the bowl for all the joys shared by our online community. And we will drop one stone to represent all of the sorrows shared by our online community. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love.
I invite you to come into this moment of centering. Get comfortable where you sit, in your pew or in your seat at home. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Perhaps your eyes fall closed. As we prepare to hold some silence together, let us remember that what we mean by silence is the absence of grown-ups talking to each other so that we can listen more closely to the sounds of life. The sounds of the cars going past outside and neighbors walking by. The sounds of our children giggling and running upstairs. The breath of the neighbor beside us. The beating of our own hearts. Spirit of life, who longs to give this world the shape of justice, but has only our hands to do it with, our voices to call it into being, may we sing out. When fear and shame threaten to silence us, grant us courage. When we've broken our vows 1,000 times, call us back into belonging. Let our hearts and hands and whole churches be open to transformation, moved to action, called to say to one another in our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, we are with you. Spirit of life, let every voice be lifted in the refrain of this new song. So I've been married about 10 years. What a way to start a sermon about conflict, right? So I've been married about 10 years. And we've been together several years before that. And normally, I think we're pretty good communicators. But I want to tell you a story that happened in my own marriage. Early in our relationship, I made this dish for dinner. It was like quinoa and tomatoes and black beans and a bunch of stuff baked together in kind of a casserole. And my partner, Brian, complimented it. And so I kept making it because Brian loves this, I thought. And I didn't like it that much, but I kept making it because, you know, Brian liked it. He complimented it. And he would always say what a great job I'd done. And I'd make it again because Brian loved it. And he'd compliment me. And then, like, second season of the pandemic, when really our politeness had been worn down quite a bit, you know the time. One of us, and I can't honestly remember which one, mentioned offhand how much they really didn't like that quinoa casserole. And the other one said, "Are you kidding me? I hate that dish." Brian had complimented it to be nice, and I kept making it to be nice, and neither of us told each other the truth, avoiding that tiny little conflict of, I really don't like the thing you made, or I really don't want to keep making the thing you like, when in reality, we just both kept eating a dish that neither of us liked for 10 years. So this morning's service is called The Joy of Conflict, which maybe seems a little oxymoronic, maybe just moronic, though I'm sure you wouldn't put it that way to my face. But I really do mean it, that conflict can be a source of joy. Now, I'm not oblivious to the fact that conflict can be uncomfortable, difficult, even downright painful. But I don't think conflict itself is necessarily a problem. In fact, I think our tendency, our cultural tendency to avoid conflict, to run away from it or push it down before it can rise to the surface of our relationships in order to avoid discomfort, difficulty, and pain is much more of a problem. Some of my favorite nonviolent activist friends who are much more comfortable and competent with conflict than I am have told me that they think about conflict like a check engine light in a car. It's not a problem in and of itself. It's primarily informational. So we might get some big feelings about seeing our check engine light come on when we turn on our car on our way to work in the morning. It might mean we're frustrated or preemptively exhausted by the work that it indicates we'll need to do to fix things. It might mean we're disappointed or stressed about a number of potential outcomes, but the light itself isn't a problem, right? It's a helpful hint pointing us toward a problem that would exist with or without the light. In fact, avoiding conflict, getting rid of the check engine light, would only make us less aware of problems that might have been easy to work on if we'd known about them earlier. When we change the way we think about conflict as a gift of information about our relationships, or even about ourselves and our values, we get access to all the opportunities it offers for growth, for transformation and deeper meaning and stronger connections in our relationships. I used to have this boss who had a really passive style of communication. He hated conflict of any kind and would bend over backwards to avoid even the faintest hint of a possibility of disagreement. It meant that it was often hard to tell what he wanted from me. He would make factual statements like, "Someone will have to take charge of those PowerPoint slides." And it was up to me to decide whether there was instruction implicit in there or not. Or he'd make emotion-based I statements like they teach you to do in healthy communication seminars and whatnot. Like, "I'm just overwhelmed at the thought of doing this whole project by myself. It's a lot for one person." And as his staff, we'd have to offer to help or not, and hope we were correct in assuming what he needed. As you might imagine, I started to feel a lot of resentment around my expectations in this role, since they were hardly ever clear to me. My resentment, ironically, felt like a silent conflict with this extremely conflict-avoidant person about his conflict avoidance. In fact, his extreme conflict avoidance hadn't kept him out of conflict, it just kept him unaware of the conflict he was in with most of the people in his life. But this is not a sad story about a sad man, because one day something magical happened. Not quite as magical as our story, but pretty magical. See, this man was married to a therapist for many, many years, a fact I found in the midst of my resentment to be perplexing. I'll admit it. One morning, while I was in this boss's office, his wife popped in. They had a quick chat, and I got to hear their interaction. He made the same sort of extremely passive, indirect ask of her that he tended to do with his staff. He said something like, "I'll be working pretty late tonight. I don't know how much time I'll have to get groceries on my way home." And this remarkable woman waited a beat, and then she said sweetly, gently, and as clear as could be, "Hun, are you making a request of me?" He paused and said, "Well, yeah, would it be all right if you got the groceries tonight?" She agreed and went on her way. And I was forever changed. This little phrase, "Are you making a request of me?" changed my relationship with that supervisor and freed me from so much resentment. It changed all my relationships, honestly. I probably use that phrase at least once a week to establish clarity of expectations with people I'm in relationships with. Heck, I say it to my kids every time they whine that I'm hungry or I'm bored. And I hope it's helping them for me to say, "Are you making a request of me?" To be clear in asking for what they need. I hope it's setting up a pattern of trusting that any potential conflict that arises from making our needs known is worth having. Being afraid of conflict tends to, like my old boss, just get us into conflicts we don't know we're in. It tends to just turn off the check engine light, doesn't it? My friend Gwen is the co-director of the Gandhi Institute here in Rochester, and a bit of an expert at conflict transforming communication. She once told me something that has stuck with me ever since. Like my old boss's wife, she's one of those really brilliant people who will sometimes say a thing offhand that just sticks in your brain for the rest of time. Anyway, she said once, "Most of the times when I find myself feeling resentment, it's because I've failed to make a request for what I need, or I've neglected to set a boundary." And at first, that pissed me off a little bit. Like, when I'm feeling resentment, I really want it to be someone else's fault, you know? Like, I want it to be up to someone else to solve the problem of how I feel about them. But I think that Gwen's observation summarizes most of what we actually have control over in relationship conflicts. Making requests for what we need and setting boundaries around what we can and cannot tolerate. And it can still be hard for us to do that, right? Let me be clear off the bat that I am very much included in the us here. My family of origin, thanks to large family dynamics and their particular blend of neurodivergence, tends to be very direct in communication. Because I know that everyone thinks they're direct in communication, something our society claims to prefer regardless of what it actually teaches us to do, and very few of us are direct in communication. I checked in with my partner about whether my perceptions of my parents' communication style were really accurate. "Oh, they're direct. All right, to a fault," he said. Your mom says absolutely every thought she ever thinks, and your dad cannot understand subtext to save his life. So, as an aside, maybe you're worried now that my parents are listening to this live stream and might be insulted by me saying this about them. This is how blunt the communication expectations in my family are. They are definitely listening, hi mom, and not at all insulted by these direct factual statements about them. So, I was raised by my parents to communicate very directly and comprehensively, but they aren't the only ones who raised me. And maybe you were raised in a family of direct communicators, or maybe not, but our families aren't the only people who raise us. I was also enculturated by a society enmeshed in white supremacy, which teaches us that avoiding outward conflict is a core value. It is the work of our lifetimes to undo this, and we will be undoing it until it's ancient history. So perhaps you've seen or heard about that list or infographic of elements of white supremacy culture. Fear of open conflict is right there in the middle of it. In particular, my role as a white woman in white supremacy culture is prescribed as the person who smooths over conflicts before they arise. White women have been conditioned by our culture to maintain white supremacy by embodying a kind of politeness that is a replacement for actual compassion and right action. White supremacy requires white men's rage to exist, and white women's role in this system is to be the pressure valve for that rage, of which we are also victims. So hear me when I say it is no small thing to undo that depth of fear of conflict that we have been imbued with. This is maybe a good place to pause and say that while we're talking about white supremacy, cultural differences in communication styles are morally neutral. There are cultures that tend toward direct communication. American deaf culture, for example, is so direct, it's not unusual to greet someone you haven't seen for a while with as blunt a statement as, wow, you've gained some weight since I saw you last. In many less direct cultures, that observation would be unbearably rude. On the other hand, some cultures tend toward much less direct communication. I used to live in South Asia, where indirect communication is expected and bluntness is incredibly impolite. And as a white American, it took me quite some time to not be put off by what felt like a lack of transparency or honesty. More direct communicators tend to view subtlety as manipulative, and to more indirect communicators, frank talk can seem quite disrespectful and undiplomatic. Neither are right or wrong necessarily. These communication styles may be more or less effective in different contexts, but they're morally neutral, and either or both can be used to transform and heal conflicts in meaningful ways in our relationships. What is problematic is the use of one communication style or another to avoid healing and transforming conflicts, to avoid the risk of conflict and the work of moving through it that is necessary to have depth in our relationships. Dr. Tema Okun, who first created that list of white supremacy culture elements, talks about this problem in particular as people in power ignoring conflict or creating and preserving systems that suppress it. It looks, she says, like an overemphasis on politeness at the expense of compassion, justice, or truth. It takes the form of blame directed at a person who raises a problem or a disagreement rather than collective work at resolving the problem. Conflict avoidance often looks like people who mask their emotions, maintaining an outward calm, being characterized as rational and intelligent, while people who express their emotions are characterized as irrational or unintelligent. It has the effect of devaluing emotional intelligence and overvaluing control. So the first thing we can do to lean into the joy that conflict offers us and shake off some of our inherited white supremacy is to stop caring about how rational we are in our conflicts. This is a hard one for UUs. We love to hold our faith up as rational and reasonable as compared to all the others. It makes us feel so great, right? Superior almost, wouldn't you say? Yeah, we've got to let go of that. Listen, we can't actually know how rational we are. So if we're making rational choices, we'll think we're being rational. And if we're making irrational choices by virtue of our irrationality, we'll think they're rational. It's not the metric we need. It's not a metric that works. What we can gauge, no matter what we're going through, is connection. We can connect with how we're feeling inside our bodies. We can connect with the truth of another person's experience as they tell it to us. And when our own feelings are at odds with another's experience, we can set aside goals of rightness or rationality. Because if our goal is connection, then conflict is a joy, a gift, an opportunity to work through that difference together toward a more deep and meaningful connection. But white supremacy culture would have us center reason and rationality, which really just centers power and control. Whoever maintains power and control over their own emotions in this model wins. And winning, of course, is the way to maintain power and control in a relationship. When we reject white supremacy and center connection, winning isn't part of conflict at all. And the only control we have is around our own actions. Our power is not over another person, but the power to recognize our needs, make requests, and set boundaries around our own behavior. It is a gift, and it's really hard. My older child is almost 7, and we've been talking a lot about what it means to set a boundary lately, especially with his toddler sibling. I've been encouraging him to deal with certain annoyances by setting boundaries. A relationship boundary, I say at least once a day, is about telling someone what you will do to keep yourself safe, healthy, and happy. So a few days ago, they were building with blocks, and the little sibling was making this loud screeching noise for fun, apparently. I could see across the room that my older kid was getting annoyed. He had remarked a few times about how loud the noise was and how much he disliked it. He had made requests for quiet. So I said, now's a good time to set a boundary. He stood up and said, if you keep making that noise, I'm going to smash your blocks to the ground. Whoops, I interjected very quickly. That's actually a threat, not a boundary. Let's try again. Remember, a boundary is about what you will do for yourself to stay safe, healthy, and happy. He sighed very loudly and said, fine. If you keep making that noise, I'm going to go away and stop playing with you. Friends, it is good to remember that setting and holding relationship boundaries is a slog. It is a lifelong practice, even when we're older than 7, sometimes when we're 57 and in a marriage or a lifelong friendship or serving on a church committee, we get mixed up about what is a boundary and what is a threat. So let's make it clear, right? Because my child needs reminders, and so do I, and so do all of us. A boundary is a choice we make for ourselves about how to stay safe, healthy, and happy. emotionally, financially, spiritually safe, healthy, and happy. So if it is a way of seeking power or control over anyone but yourself, it's probably a threat, not a boundary. As a more adult example, if you don't agree to stop drinking, I will bring you to a rehab facility against your will. That's a threat. But I'm having so many complicated feelings about your drinking. I've decided to only be around you when you're sober from now on. That's a boundary. See how one is about control over another person's choices, and the other is about control over our own choices. Another example, just a hypothetical. If you don't make the policy change I'm passionate about, I will pull my enormous pledge from the church budget. Not based in reality, hypothetically. That's a threat. But I'm feeling like this church's values aren't very well aligned with mine anymore. And I need to stop coming for a little while to protect my integrity. That's a boundary. It's important to do this practice of boundary setting in small ways so that we've developed our conflict muscles when the big stuff comes up. And in a culture that would have us avoid conflict to maintain systems of control, it's a significant spiritual exercise to remind ourselves that all we control in any relationship is our own behaviors. Boundary setting in the midst of conflict is a gift to ourselves in that way. It is the practice of making clearer and clearer the space around the self. Our opening hymn this morning, "May Nothing Evil Cross This Door," was meant to be the blessing of a building of a church. But I like to think of it also as a blessing of our own bodies. The boundaries we set in the care and connection with our deepest selves will withstand the battering of the storm. They will indeed keep hate out and hold love in. And clarity of boundaries, clarity around the limits of what we each control, makes conflict a blessing to our communities. Without the goal of winning or ending up with power over others, we can step into the spaces where our hearts are at odds, with our boundaries keeping resentment away, and do the work of transforming conflict into deeper meaning and even joy. May it be so, and amen.
Join us in singing hymn 346.
Let's join in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but keep its light in our hearts. With it, take love and justice, taking it outside these walls. Until we are together again. May all our differences bring us, through the holy work of conflict, into deeper and deeper connection. Amen.